Elvis Presley once had a literal trunk full of prescription drugs wheeled around backstage, managed by his inner circle. He sometimes spent entire nights sealed in his massive Las Vegas suite, surrounded only by his closest guards, watching movies until dawn. His security detail was so intense they carried firearms openly backstage and practiced drawing weapons on each other in the hotel hallways, often startling unsuspecting staff or guests. During his peak Vegas years, he gave away dozens of brand new Cadillacs, expensive jewelry, and even houses on sudden whims to friends, entourage members, and sometimes complete strangers he'd just met. Number 11. Karate kicks almost took out his own guys. Elvis's obsession with karate wasn't just a phase, it was deeply integrated into his life, especially backstage in Vegas. He held a black belt in Kenpo Karate under instructor Ed Parker and saw himself as a genuine practitioner, not just a celebrity dabbler. Backstage before and after shows wasn't just for relaxing. It often turned into an impromptu dojo. Elvis, still buzzing from the performance or psyching himself up, would launch into karate demonstrations. These weren't light-hearted exercises. They were intense, full-contact displays of his skills, often directed at members of his Memphis Mafia entourage. Red West and Sonny West, both physically imposing members of his security and inner circle, often found themselves on the receiving end of these demonstrations. Elvis would showcase kicks, chops, and blocks, expecting them to react appropriately. Sometimes, however, the line between demonstration and actual combat blurred, especially if Elvis felt his authority was challenged, or if he was under the influence of prescribed medications that could affect his mood and judgment. There were numerous accounts of near misses, where a kick flew dangerously close to someone's head, or a chop landed harder than intended. The guys knew they had to be constantly alert when Elvis was in carrot mode. One particular story often recounted involves Elvis demonstrating a move on Red West. Elvis reportedly executed a kick that, had Red not reacted instinctively and moved just in time, could have caused serious injury. The intensity was real. It wasn't play acting for Elvis. He demanded respect for his martial arts abilities. He'd fly Ed Parker and other instructors to Vegas to train with him, further blurring the lines between his stage life and his personal obsessions. These backstage sessions could happen at any hour, fueled by Elvis's nocturnal schedule and restless energy. Imagine the scene: the king of rock and roll, possibly still in a bejeweled jumpsuit, or a custom karate guy, executing powerful kicks and strikes in the confined space of a luxury hotel suite or a crowded dressing room, while his friends tried to anticipate his moves and avoid getting hurt. It was a testament to his physical prowess even later in his career, but also a sign of the sometimes volatile and unpredictable atmosphere that surrounded him offstage. His bodyguards weren't just protecting him from external threats. Sometimes they had to protect themselves from the king himself during these intense impromptu martial arts sessions. The energy wasn't always positive. Frustration or anger could fuel these displays, making them genuinely dangerous moments for those closest to him. Number 10. He had a rolling pharmacy following him everywhere. The sheer amount and variety of prescription medications Elvis took during his Vegas years is staggering, and the logistics of managing them became a significant paged operation. It wasn't just a few pills here and there. Accounts from multiple members of his inner circle described large medical bags, sometimes even a dedicated trunk, filled with vials, bottles, and syringes. This wasn't hidden away. It was an open secret backstage, a constant presence. Nicknamed the Attack, The process involved preparing and administering combinations of drugs designed to get Elvis energized enough to perform his demanding 2 shows a night, and then others to bring him down afterwards so he could sleep. Dr. George Nichopoulos, known as Dr. Nick, became Elvis's personal physician and traveled with him extensively. While Dr. Nick stated his intention was to control and eventually reduce Elvis's reliance on medication, the reality reported by others was a near constant supply readily available. Members of the Memphis Mafia were often tasked with organizing the medications, ensuring the right pills were available at the right times. There were uppers like dextrine to combat fatigue and provide energy for the high-octane performances. There were downers like Valium, Quaaludes, and various barbiturates to help him wind down from the adrenaline rush and combat chronic insomnia. Painkillers like Demerol and Dilaudid were frequently used, initially, for genuine ailments but increasingly relied upon. Backstage before a show, specific members of the entourage would prepare injections or lay out pills based on Elvis's requests or perceived needs. The atmosphere could be tense as showtime approached, ensuring Elvis was ready. After the show, the process reversed, focusing on sedation. This mobile pharmacy was a constant fixture in his dressing room and hotel suite. It wasn't just about managing show schedules. The drugs became intertwined with his daily existence, blurring the lines between medical necessity and dependency. Witnesses described Elvis sometimes being groggy or unfocused backstage before the attack kicked in, and heavily sedated afterward. The sheer volume was immense. Dr. Nick himself later admitted to prescribing thousands upon thousands of doses of various drugs during the final years of Elvis's life. The presence of this rolling pharmacy was a stark, behind-the-scenes reality contrasting sharply with the vibrant, seemingly invincible image Elvis projected on stage under the bright lights of the International Hotel. It underscored the physical and psychological pressures he was under and the methods used to keep the multi-million-dollar show going night after night. Number 9. His hotel suite was basically Fort Knox with sequins. Elvis Presley's security in Las Vegas went far beyond typical celebrity protection. It was a quasi-military operation headquartered in his lavish penthouse suite at the International Hotel, later the Las Vegas Hilton. The suite itself, occupying the entire 30th floor, was palatial, but access was incredibly restricted. You didn't just wander up to Elvis's door. The Memphis Mafia, his loyal group of friends and bodyguards, controlled all entry points. Elevators were often manned or monitored, stairwells checked, and anyone approaching the suite was vetted. These weren't just burly guys standing around. Many were armed. Red West, Sonny West, Dick Grob, and others often carried firearms openly backstaged and within the private areas of the hotel. Elvis himself had a fascination with guns and law enforcement badges. He collected honorary badges from police departments across the country and encouraged his security team to be well-armed and vigilant. There were numerous documented death threats against Elvis during this period, some taken very seriously by the FBI and his own team. This fueled an atmosphere of heightened, alert, sometimes bordering on paranoia. Inside the suite, security measures continued. Specific members were assigned to posts, monitoring hallways or inner rooms. Communication systems, like walkie-talkies, were used to coordinate movements. There were drills. Reports describe members of the security team practicing drawing their weapons in the hallways, startling hotel staff or the rare approved visitor. They took potential threats incredibly seriously. One famous incident involved a perceived threat during a show leading to heightened security where bodyguards literally formed a protective ring around Elvis on stage while he performed. Backstage, this translated into meticulous checks of the dressing room, stage access points, and even food deliveries. Colonel Parker also had his own security contingent, sometimes creating overlapping layers of protection. The goal was to create an impenetrable bubble around Elvis, protecting him not just from physical harm, but also from unwanted intrusions, process servers, or overly zealous fans. This intense security apparatus contributed to Elvis's isolation, making spontaneous interactions with the outside world nearly impossible. The king might have ruled the stage, but offstage, he lived within a gilded cage, albeit one guarded by a private army. Number 8. Surrounded by thousands, he'd retreat to watch movies alone, almost. One of the most poignant paradoxes of Elvis's Vegas years was his profound isolation, despite being surrounded by adoring crowds and a large entourage. After the thunderous applause, the flashing cameras, and the demands of his performance died down, Elvis would often retreat into the vast emptiness of his penthouse suite. While members of the Memphis Mafia were always nearby, guarding the doors and managing his needs, Elvis frequently spent the late night and early morning hours in near solitude, engaged in one of his favorite pastimes, watching movies. He had movie projectors set up in his suite and would screen films for hours on end. His taste was eclectic, ranging from the latest Hollywood blockbusters to obscure B movies, comedies. He loved Peter Sellers and Monty Python, and notably, martial arts films. This wasn't usually a social event. While sometimes a few close friends or a girlfriend might join him, often it was just Elvis, lost in the flickering images on the screen, with only a bodyguard or two stationed discreetly nearby. These movie marathons could last until dawn, reinforcing his nocturnal lifestyle and further disconnecting him from the normal rhythm of the world outside the hotel. This retreat into movies served multiple purposes. It was a form of escapism, a way to shut out the pressures of fame, the demands of his career, and perhaps the chronic pain or anxieties he experienced. It was a way to connect with worlds outside his own confined reality. It was also a symptom of his increasing isolation. The security bubble, the demands of his schedule, and his own inclinations meant he rarely ventured out of the hotel complex during his Vegas residencies. His world shrank to the stage, the dressing room, and the penthouse suite. The image of Elvis Presley, the world's biggest star, sitting alone, or nearly alone, in a darkened room, watching reel after reel of film while the glittering lights of Las Vegas shone outside, is a powerful behind-the-scenes glimpse into the loneliness that could accompany immense fame. He was physically surrounded by people, his entourage, hotel staff, the thousands who packed his shows, yet emotionally and socially he often seemed adrift in his own private world, finding solace or distraction in the manufactured realities of cinema. Number 7. He once gave away Cadillacs like party favors. Elvis Presley's generosity was legendary, almost mythical, and it reached peak levels during his Vegas years. Flush with cash from his record-breaking residency at the International Hotel, Elvis indulged in impulsive, extravagant gift-giving that left recipients stunned and accountants scrambling. He didn't just give presents, he bestowed life-altering tokens of affection or appreciation, often on a whim. Cadillacs were a particular favorite. There are countless verified stories of Elvis deciding, often late at night or after a particularly good show, to buy cars for people. He wouldn't just buy one, he'd buy fleets. He famously bought a slew of Cadillacs for his inner circle friends, and sometimes even people he barely knew. One well-known incident involved him seeing a bank teller admiring his limousine, he promptly bought her a new Cadillac on the spot. He'd walk into a dealership, point at several cars, and declare who they were for paying in cash or arranging immediate financing. It wasn't limited to cars. Expensive jewelry, diamond rings, necklaces, custom pieces from Schwartz and Abelser, his preferred Memphis jeweler who often flew pieces to Vegas, was handed out freely. He bought houses for friends and family. He'd hand out rolls of cash to members of his entourage or hotel staff who caught his eye or did him a small favor. This wasn't calculated philanthropy. It was impulsive, often emotional generosity. Seeing someone's delight seemed to bring him genuine joy. It was also perhaps a way for him to exert control and affection in a world where genuine connections might have felt increasingly complicated. If someone admired something he owned, whether it was a ring on his finger or the car he was driving, he might just give it to them. Members of the Memphis Mafia learned never to praise his possessions too highly unless they were prepared to receive them as gifts. This level of spending was staggering. While Colonel Parker managed the big-picture finances, often to his own benefit, Elvis controlled his personal spending money and he spent it lavishly. Backstage. After a show, he might suddenly decide to reward his band or backup singers with expensive watches or cash bonuses. These weren't planned expenditures. They were spontaneous acts, fueled by his mood and his immense wealth. This almost compulsive generosity became a defining characteristic of his off-stage life in Vegas, a flamboyant counterpoint to his on-staged persona. Number 6. Backstage pranks could get seriously out of hand. Beneath the glitz and the pressure of the Vegas shows Elvis and his Memphis Mafia maintained a boyish camaraderie, often expressed through elaborate and sometimes destructive pranks. Backstage at the International Hotel wasn't just a workplace. It was their playground, and the humor could range from juvenile water pistol fights to potentially hazardous stunts. Elvis, often the instigator, delighted in catching his friends off guard. Water guns were a staple, leading to full-blown soaking battles in dressing rooms and hallways. But the pranks escalated far beyond that. Firecrackers were frequently set off backstage, sometimes thrown near unsuspecting individuals just to see them jump. This wasn't always harmless fun. The loud bangs could be genuinely startling and potentially dangerous in crowded or confined spaces. Elvis reportedly found igniting firecrackers near sleeping members of his entourage particularly amusing. They also engaged in raiding each other's rooms, hiding belongings, short-sheeting beds, or rearranging furniture. Given the luxurious setting, these pranks could sometimes involve expensive items or hotel property, leading to occasional damages that Elvis would inevitably pay for without a second thought. One recurring theme involved M80 firecrackers or cherry bombs being flushed down toilets, causing them to explode and shatter porcelain fixtures. This seemed to be a particular favorite, despite the obvious mess and potential for injury. The goal was often shock value and eliciting a big reaction. Another infamous prank involved rigging buckets of water over doorways or setting up elaborate booby traps. While often fueled by boredom during the downtime between shows or Elvis's nocturnal schedule, the pranks also served as a way to maintain bonds within the group and blow off steam. However, the intensity could sometimes cross the line. Tempers could flare, especially if a prank went wrong or targeted someone repeatedly. Elvis, being the boss, was usually immune from the most severe retaliations, but he encouraged a rough-and-tumble atmosphere where practical jokes were expected. This culture of backstage mayhem provided a stark contrast to the tightly choreographed performances happening just yards away, revealing a more chaotic and sometimes reckless side to life within the king's inner circle. Number 5. Colonel Parker ran a mini casino just offstage. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's enigmatic and controlling manager, was as much a fixture backstage in Vegas as Elvis himself, but his focus wasn't always on the music. A notorious gambler, Parker essentially set up his own command center and, according to many accounts, a mini business hub just steps away from the showroom. While Elvis captivated thousands on stage, the Colonel held court in his own domain, often in a roped-off area or a dedicated office space provided by the hotel. This wasn't just a quiet spot to relax. Parker conducted business relentlessly. Hotel executives, promoters, potential partners, and journalists would cycle through his backstage realm. Deals were struck, contracts discussed, and merchandise strategies planned, often while Elvis was actually performing. Parker was known for his shrewd, sometimes ruthless, negotiation tactics, always focused on maximizing profit, a significant portion of which went directly into his own pockets due to his hefty commission, often cited as close to 50%. But beyond the official business, Parker indulged his personal passion: gambling. Witnesses describe Parker frequently engaging in betting activities. This could range from high-stakes card games with hotel executives or other high rollers to simply placing bets on various outcomes. His presence was so constant and his gambling habits so well known that the hotel management catered to him extensively. He had direct lines to the casino floor and easy access to credit. His backstage area often felt like an extension of the casino itself, a hub of financial transactions and chance operating parallel to the artistic performance happening nearby. Parker's focus was firmly on the commercial aspects of the Elvis machine. While Elvis worried about hitting the high notes, Parker worried about the box office receipts, the merchandise, sales, and his next wager. This created a distinct split in the backstage atmosphere: the artistic energy surrounding Elvis and his band, and the business and gambling energy surrounding the Colonel. Parker rarely watched the show itself. He'd seen it countless times. His domain was the negotiation table, and metaphorically speaking, the betting window just off stage. Number 4. He searched for God in between hound dog and high kicks. Amidst the hedonism, the grueling performance schedule, and the increasing reliance on prescription drugs, Elvis Presley engaged in a deep, often private, spiritual quest during his Vegas years. This wasn't a casual interest. It was an intense search for meaning, purpose, and connection beyond the superficiality of fame. Backstage and in the seclusion of his penthouse suite, long after the crowds had gone home, Elvis would immerse himself in spiritual and philosophical literature. He devoured books on various religions, mysticism, esoteric philosophies, and the afterlife. Titles like The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and various texts on numerology, the occult, and different in trebling library. He didn't just read them. He studied them, underlined passages, made notes in the margins, and eagerly discussed their concepts with the few members of his inner circle who shared his interest, most notably his hairdresser and spiritual confidant, Larry Geller. These discussions could happen at any hour, often stretching late into the night. Elvis would passionately explore ideas about life, death, reincarnation, God, and his own purpose in the world. He felt a deep spiritual yearning, sometimes feeling that his fame and connection with audiences had a higher significance he couldn't quite grasp. He was fascinated by stories of spiritual healers and people with psychic abilities. This quest sometimes manifested in unusual ways. He wore various spiritual symbols alongside his crosses, including the Hebrew Chai symbol and an Egyptian Ankh. He spoke of experiencing visions or profound spiritual moments. This intense spiritual searching provided a stark contrast to the excess and isolation that otherwise characterized his Vegas life. It was a deeply personal, behind-the-scenes aspect of his personality, revealing a man grappling with fundamental questions far removed from the rock and roll image. While on stage, he was the king commanding legions of fans. Off stage, he was often a seeker, looking for answers in ancient texts and late-night conversations, trying to reconcile the spiritual man with the larger-than-life icon. Number 3, getting ready for the show was a military operation, with more hairspray. The transformation from the private, often weary Elvis Presley into the dynamic, sequined superstar the Vegas audiences saw each night was a carefully orchestrated high-energy ritual. Getting Elvis ready for showtime involved a small army of personnel moving with precision and speed within the confines of his dressing room and backstage area. It wasn't a leisurely process. It was a production in itself. First came the physical preparation. Depending on the time and his condition, this might involve the infamous attack of medications to boost his energy levels. Then, the grooming began. Larry Geller or other stylist would meticulously style Elvis's trademark hair, a process requiring concentration and copious amounts of hairspray to achieve the perfect look that could withstand the rigors of the performance. His makeup, usually subtle but essential under the harsh stage lights, would be applied. Simultaneously, his elaborate stage costumes, the famous jumpsuits designed by Bill Belu, would be laid out and prepared by members of his wardrobe team, like Charlie Hodge. These weren't simple outfits. They were heavy, often weighing 30 pounds or more, adorned with intricate beadwork, studs, and jewels, and required careful handling. Putting them on often required assistance. Elvis would typically wear custom jewelry, large rings, necklaces, and belts, adding to the weight and the overall effect. As showtime neared, the energy backstage ramped up. The band and backup singers, like the Sweet Inspirations and J.D. Sumner and the Stamps Quartet, would be warming up, their sounds filtering into Elvis's dressing area. Members of the Memphis Mafia would be coordinating security, ensuring pathways were clear, and managing last-minute requests from Elvis. Colonel Parker might make a brief appearance, though often his focus was elsewhere. There were specific routines. Charlie Hodge would hand Elvis his scarves, later thrown to adoring fans, and ensure he had water or Gatorade nearby. Elvis might run through vocal warm-ups or practice a few karate moves to loosen up. The atmosphere was a mixture of nervous anticipation and practiced routine. Every person had a role, and everything had to run like clockwork to get Elvis on stage, looking and sounding like the king, precisely on schedule. It was a high-pressure, coordinated effort hidden from the audience, a behind-the-scenes ballet of stylists, wardrobe assistants, bodyguards, and musicians, all focused on launching the star into the spotlight. Number 2, meeting other superstars was sometimes super awkward. Las Vegas, during Elvis's residency, was a magnet for celebrities. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Tom Jones, Anne Margaret, Cary Grant, Muhammad Ali, the biggest names in entertainment and sports flocked to see the king perform. Backstage meetings were frequent, arranged by the hotel or Colonel Parker, and while often filled with mutual admiration, they could also be surprisingly awkward or stilted. Elvis, despite his immense fame, could sometimes be shy or reserved in these encounters, particularly with idols like Sinatra. There was a mutual respect, but the larger-than-life personas didn't always translate into smooth conversation. Accounts describe moments of silence or polite, somewhat formal exchanges. Elvis was often more comfortable interacting with his own band and entourage than with fellow superstars. Tom Jones was a frequent visitor, and the two shared a genuine friendship and mutual respect, often talking late into the night about music and performing. However, even these interactions could have odd moments, sometimes involving impromptu karate demonstrations or comparisons of stage moves. Muhammad Ali's visit was iconic. Elvis, a boxing fan, presented Ali with a custom-made robe emblazoned with "The People's Champion." Their meeting was captured in famous photographs, puting mutual admiration between two towering figures of popular culture. However, many other celebrity visits were less documented and more perfunctory. Elvis might exchange brief pleasantries, pose for a photo, and then retreat back into his private sanctum. The sheer number of requests for meetings could be overwhelming, and Elvis wasn't always on. His mood, his physical state, often dependent on the timing of his medication cycle, and the ever-present security detail could influence the nature of these encounters. Sometimes, the awkwardness stemmed from the entourage itself. The Memphis Mafia formed a protective, sometimes intimidating wall around Elvis. Visiting celebrities had to navigate this inner circle, which could feel cliquey or unwelcoming. Colonel Parker also controlled access, sometimes using these meetings for his own networking purposes. These backstage encounters, therefore, weren't always the glamorous mingling of equals one might imagine. They were often brief, carefully managed events, sometimes marked by shyness, formality, or the slightly surreal atmosphere that permeated Elvis's tightly controlled world. While genuine connections were sometimes made, many meetings remained polite but slightly uncomfortable intersections of different celebrity orbits. Number 1. Forget peanut butter and banana. Think mountains of bacon. While the fried peanut butter and banana sandwich became Elvis's most famous culinary association, his actual diet during the Vegas years, particularly backstage and in his suite, was often characterized by massive quantities of rich, southern comfort food consumed at odd hours. His cravings were legendary among his entourage and the hotel kitchen staff, who were on call 24/7 to satisfy his whims. And one item stood out: bacon. Elvis loved bacon. Not just a few strips with breakfast, he consumed it in enormous quantities. Accounts from the Memphis Mafia and cooks describe him ordering platters piled high with crispy bacon, which he would eat at any time of day or night. He might eat a pound of bacon or more in a single sitting. It wasn't just a side dish. It was often the main event. This craving extended to other rich foods as well. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, fried chicken, cheeseburgers, often ordered by the dozen for himself and his entourage, and gravy were staples. He loved Eskimo pies and other ice creams, consumed in bulk. Vegetables were rarely featured prominently. His eating habits reflected his southern roots and his nocturnal schedule. He often skipped traditional meal times, preferring to eat large meals late at night, after his shows or in the early hours of the morning, before finally attempting sleep. The hotel kitchen had standing orders for his favorite items and had to be prepared to cook large amounts on demand. Backstage. Platters of food were often available for Elvis and the group. These weren't delicate canapés. They were hearty, often fried meals. This diet, combined with his increasing reliance on prescription drugs, some of which could stimulate appetite or cause weight gain, and decreasing physical activity outside of his stage performances, contributed significantly to the noticeable weight fluctuations during his Vegas era. The sheer volume of food could be astonishing. Stories abound of room service carts laden with enough food for a dozen people, primarily for Elvis and a few close companions. His love for bacon, in particular, became a running theme. It wasn't just a preference, it was an indulgence on a grand scale, a readily available comfort in the artificial environment of the Las Vegas hotel. The image of Elvis post-show relaxing in his suite surrounded by friends and platters heaped with bacon and other rich foods offers a very human, behind-the-scenes contrast to the tightly controlled, physically demanding image he projected on stage just hours earlier